Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. We are talking with my buddy Rob, and we're talking about non-negotiable leadership lists. What are the things that leaders need to have before you bring them on the team? We're going to jump into that conversation, but before we do, I want to encourage you to always check out everything churchboom.org. We have so much to offer there. Church Boom University, coaching certification programs, executive coaching, impact coaching, just tons of ways to help you. Leaders are learners, and if you're a leader, you got to be learning. And so check out churchboom.org and get plugged in. But let's jump into our conversation with Rob today. Let's jump into it today, and let's start our coaching conversation. How can I help you?
Yeah. So, have you ever been in a situation where you're headed down, you've made leadership decisions, you're headed down the pathway, you're not getting the results that you want? How do you know when you should course correct and do something new? What I don't want to do is I don't want to be the church that every 6 months is implementing a brand new system and we're just chasing results. And I don't want to be the church that's like, oh, Church of the Highlands has results, let's copy what they do. Oh, that doesn't work for us. Oh, this is what North Point does, let's copy them. And then you're changing systems every 6 months to a year because you're chasing success. I don't want that. But at the same time, how do you know if what you're doing, if you're like, yeah, if we just keep digging a little bit, we're about to hit gold, or no, we've been digging on this for a long time, gold's not in sight, we need to go another direction. How do you filter that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Your comment about hitting gold is one of my favorite books. It's called 3 Feet from Gold. It's a true story about a guy that before they had all the radar and all the technology, he was literally 36 inches away from gold and then sold the mine because he just gave up. And within a matter of a month or two, someone discovered gold. Wow. And he was 36 inches away, obviously before all the, technology of being able to know where it's at. But yeah, so it reminds me of my favorite book. Couple thoughts. One thing is, Rob, is you had mentioned you start something, and I don't want to be every 6 months, then come out with a new thing, whatever. So a little thing that you and I have talked about before in some of our executive coaching is, I think is important, and this doesn't answer fully your question, but part of it, I think it's always important, whenever necessary, to beta test things. Man, if there's a way to beta test a staff member, I was telling a church one time, hey, don't just hire a worship leader. If you can beta test that person, beta test the program. The other part is, it's hard to know when to pull the plug on something, and when you feel like it is not working. And I think part of that pulling the plug is really deciding what you're pulling. It really varies on what we're talking about. Are we talking about raising $1 million? Are we talking about a staff member? Are we talking about a new way to do small groups? What exactly is it? So one thing I always say is beta test. Second thing is before I ever enter into anything, just so you know, I always figure out what the exit strategy is going to be before I even enter into it. So that is a huge thing. I always think about calculated risk. I always think about acceptable loss and a potential exit strategy for anything that I'm going to do. It's like, what is the acceptable loss? What is the calculated risk? And then what is the exit strategy? If this doesn't work, how do I get out of this? And so it's something that you're going to need. I would encourage you to think about, because it's different. If it's like, man, I'm trying to do something major and it's a huge vision, I don't think I'm going to get it right up front. I'm going to have to course correct as I go along. Man, I wanted to raise $5 million, or I wanted to do this big ministry, and I just didn't get it right, so I give up. Like, I think about Church Boom, in the first 3 years, it was fine. And then we started getting serious about it, and we could not find a recipe. But I knew we were moving in the right direction. And then finally, it just, things started clicking, and man, it's just God's done amazing things. However, one is I always thought what the exit strategy would be, and two is we always beta tested everything because we didn't want to fully commit until we knew it was going to work. The one thing I do look at when it's time to pull the plug is what resources is it taking or taking from? What energy is it taking or taking from? So I want to know the energy, the resources, and possibly the leadership. Is it worth it, or do we have another way of doing this? Those are not always easy decisions because you can pull the plug, 3 feet from gold, or you can pull the plug when you're 185 miles away from gold and you're not going to get there in your lifetime. But knowing when to do that. So beta test is really important. Knowing what your exit strategy is, no matter what, is really important. And then thirdly is looking and evaluating, is the energy worth it? Is the resources worth it? Is the leadership worth it? Because it's going to cost in those three areas almost every time. And it's hard to know when to do that. It is. I don't know if there's a perfect remedy for it, but I know there's things you have to evaluate for that. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, what first wanted me to ask the question is, and maybe the specific, I loved everything that you said, by the way. I took a lot of notes, but what the specific situation that caused me to think about this is we have hired a search firm to help us find a next-gen pastor. They started working on this in December. We've had 0 candidates come through. So what I'm being told is that it's hard to find someone who wants to do kids and students. So my question is, at what point do we pivot and say, well, let's just throw all our money at one, knowing that's going to create another problem? If we say we're going to hire just a kids person because we know we can hire them, that still doesn't take up the students. But how long do you wait in this? Because right now, while we're waiting, we're doing all this work. And so I don't want to pivot and say we're just going to hire a kids person if there is a next-gen pastor, which, by the way, if you're watching that and you're looking for a job, you can contact me. But if there's a next-gen pastor out there that wants to do both and can do both, obviously we want to wait and we want to keep digging. Does that help?
It does make sense. Well, it does make sense. I guess my first question would be do we, and we don't want to mention names, but the first question is, do we have the right firm?
Well, they got us 2 other staff members, so I think we do.
Maybe. Maybe. I don't know if I would make that switch yet. Granted, it's been 4 months. I wouldn't say that's forever, but I know the situation at the church. I know you, I know your team really well. I wouldn't give up on it. I would put, there's another thing that I love to do is put a time frame out there and say, we're not going to worry about it, talk about it, get upset about it, get frustrated with it. We will start that frustration process on June 5th. Put a date out there that's like, I love doing that because when someone's getting kind of wound up about something, I'm like, how can we put this on the back burner for 90 more days? Yes, I can. Okay, so let's not put any emotional energy into it whatsoever. Let's just keep working it. Let's not complain. Let's not get upset. Let's not get frustrated until that date. On that date, we'll reevaluate it and we get as frustrated as we want, but let's not get frustrated until then.
That's good.
That way otherwise it just drains you and it gets negative. And, we all get that. We all do that. It's like, this is frustrating me. It's like, well, let's not do that. But no, I still think there's a possibility of doing that. But I would put a date out there. It's already been X amount of months. What are we going to go? Another 60 days? Yeah. And we'll see what we come up with.
And that's really good.
But I like the plug was the best part. If you're looking for a job and you want to live in Virginia, in the Hamptons.
In the Hamptons, that's right.
Yeah, just think Hamptons. A little different, but the same.
Yep. I mean, if you're blind, it's the exact same. It's just perspective. It's
just a matter of his perspective. And so anyway, hope that helps, man.
Yeah, no, that's very very helpful. You do a lot of coaching, leadership coaching. There are a lot of leaders out there that write books or give coaching, and it seems to be the common thought is to um, uh, hire slow and fire fast. And the idea is if you have someone who is, you want an A leader and you've hired someone and pretty quickly they're a B leader and they're not there, you fire them. You don't have time to deal with that. But the reality is then you have a wake of people who have been fired, and when it's fired from the church, it can do a whole bunch of damage. And so I'm not afraid to fire someone, but I have yet to hear someone give a system of, okay, how do you take someone and elevate their leadership? If you've got someone, hopefully you've done your due diligence and you've hired, the best that you possibly could. But yeah, I want an A leader, but I can only afford a B minus. So how do I take a B minus and get him to an A without the option of just fire him?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's a very good question. And you're right. It is a little different, the whole hire hard or the whole, hire slow and then fire fast. Um, and I think that, did it happen again? Can you hear me okay,
Yep,
Rob?
it
Okay.
froze. Yep,
Oh,
now I
okay.
can.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get through this. Well, he's got a lot of editing to do. I can tell you that. Guess they're auto-correcting that. Anyway, I think that's a great question, because the idea of hiring slow and firing fast is said a lot in the coaching world, a lot in the business world. It is different in a business. You let go of someone and then just pick up clear your desk out and go. The business keeps moving forward. The customers don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Way different in a church setting. So to the first part of that question, you did mention assuming you did your due diligence. I would have to say, as a coach, I don't know if we have done. I'm not saying you. I'm not, because I don't know the situation you're referring to or whatever from the past. But in all the coaching and all the churches and all the people that we're a part of, I don't think that first part that you talked about is done properly. I think due diligence is pretty weak at times. I don't think we're thinking about our personal core values, which is something I talk about all the time. What are your core values, and do they match your core values? Not the church's, your core values. Do they match those core values? What truly are you looking for in a leader? What truly is that profile? There are many times where I feel like, I'll talk to someone, they're like, hey, I hired so-and-so, and then I'll kind of meet so-and-so, and in my mind, I'm thinking, you're going to have problems. I can already see it. So I think there's a lack of, I should say, assessing up front and knowing an exact hiring system by what makes sense. Secondly, I think a big problem is, and it's not really too much of an answer to your question, but a little bit on the front end. One, I think the hiring process is not really good. Two, we do not create leadership pipelines in the church. We don't. We're not creating the next staff. We think that some firm is going to have it or some other situation is going to have it. I wrote an article in a magazine called Influence about a year or two ago called, what was it called? I think it's something about the bullpen. I can't remember the title of it, but basically it was, hey man, universities aren't pumping out pastors. Churches aren't pumping out pastors. So if you don't create your own farm league, you're done. Now I have churches. I've got a church that I'm coaching right now. Got, 25 staff members, very large church, very big multi-site church. To this day, their church is 12 years old. They've grown incredibly fast. And to this day, still have not hired anybody from the outside.
Wow.
Everybody's hired from the inside. Every single person. So they have very little firing that they do, because there's not a core issue, there's not a work ethic issue, there's not a DNA issue or a culture issue. It's already there. But they raise up leaders. They all are personally raising up leaders and developing leaders, and they got a pipeline of leaders, and so they've done a really good job with it. And so I've been coaching them for a while, but they're doing an excellent job. And so that kind of takes care of that part. Now, when you go into the other part of how do you take someone from a B minus to an A when all you can afford is the B minus type of thing, I think it's important to know what the non-negotiables are, Rob. So I liken everything to baseball because that's my favorite sport. It's kind of like, okay, so when you join the major leagues at 21 and you get to play a little bit, they're not expecting you to be here, but you have to be here to even get on the field. It's not for everybody. It's not like, well, whatever, just come on there and in 5 years you'll get better. That definitely is not the thing. They're expecting you to get better. So think about that for a minute. We're expecting that person to get better. There's no doubt they got to get better. That's 100% an expectation. But their level already has to be here to even get in the door. I think that's an important part for you to figure out. What's the non-negotiables to even get in the door? Yes, I expect you to grow, and maybe I can only afford a B-, but I can tell you these 5 things, they are non-negotiable. I won't hire anybody if they don't have these things. Now, again, I expect them to go from a B to a B- to a B to a B+ to an A- to an AA+. I expect all of that. But they're not even going to get on the playing field in your church, the next level playing field, unless they at least have this. That's an important part, and I think that's missing a lot. A lot of guys hire someone that I'm going to invest in them, and I think they can grow, and this is the best that I can afford. I've heard that a ton of times in my life. And I'm thinking, that's true, and I get everything you're saying, but you don't have a set of non-negotiables that person has to have. I don't even think you're hiring a B-. In some cases, I think it might be even lower, and the gap is so wide. So it's kind of like, is that person gravitational? Do they have natural drive? Are they natural strategists? Do they know how to get stuff done? Besides character, besides, all the kind of typical kind of things that we do as pastors, character, loyalty, all that, attitude. I think we all kind of know that. Like, I don't even, like, it probably should be on the list, but we all know that. Like, of course we want them to have a good attitude. Of course we want them to have character. Of course we want to have loyalty. They got to love God. They got to love their families. Like, that's kind of almost an absolute. Let's talk about the things that we don't, farther than that. It's like, okay, well, are they gravitational or aren't they? Are they strategic or aren't they? Are they naturally driven or aren't they? Do they get things done or aren't they? That is the stuff that we're looking for. What does their personal life say about their professional life? Because I think that who we are outside of the church becomes who we are inside as leaders. So all of that stuff are the things that I think are really, really important. So it's not a matter of, did I hire a B- person? It's a matter of, did that B- person have the right to be on the baseball field? Not everybody gets to be on that field.
Yeah.
But everybody's expected to grow, but you already got to be at a certain level. You don't just get there. So what does that look like at your church? You got to be at least here. We're going to grow you, but you got to be at least here. I think what happens is these non-negotiables, that's the ones we have to start working on, and they are the most difficult to work with.
Yeah.
If you're not naturally gravitational, how do we fix that? If you're not naturally attractional, how do we fix that? If you're not naturally strategic and naturally driven and you have natural relational intelligence, if you don't have all of that naturally, dude, you're spending time fixing those things, that is very difficult to do.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
No, that's good. Yeah.
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 So those are the things that I would be looking at. Figure out what the non-negotiables are, put them in writing. And whether you're hiring someone or the church grows and other team members are hiring someone, it's like, look, man, to get on the playing field of the next level church, you already got to have that. Otherwise, you're not coming on the field.
So I obviously have our non-negotiables that I have worked on and written down, but just for those people watching the Fly on the Wall podcast, what non-negotiables would you want to include? You said a few. Do they have drive? Are they strategic? But do you have a list that you personally work through?
Yeah, yes. That is part of that list. I always, as a matter of fact, I just taught this recently. I always talk about gravitational. I always talk about natural drive. I always talk about strategic. I definitely talk about, do they have a natural way of building leaders and building teams? Is it in them? And the one that I think a lot of people miss is relational intelligence. Those are the 5 that I look at. I'm always looking at those things because those things are so hard to fix if they're just not naturally wired that way. It's like, yeah, he's strategic, but he ticks off everybody. He's not relational intelligence. He's really, really smart, gravitational. People want to hang out with the dude. He attracts people, but he's not driven. He never gets anything done. That little combination I hear from pastors all across the United States, and I'm like, you let him on the playing field, and he wasn't already this.
Yeah,
there needs to be growth. Now that is sort of I don't know if it's a sixth one, but there has to be trajectory. In baseball, they say trajectory. In other words, they look at a college student and say he pitches 91, but we think he can get to 95. Like we can see there can be some growth. So I'm expecting the person to come in at a certain level, and I'm expecting that they can grow, that there's spaces there to grow. But those 5 things, I just taught them recently. That's why they're fresh on my mind. Those 5 things are hugely important to me because it is so hard to fix that. And you can probably think of people that worked for you, both at this church and other places you've worked, where like one of those 5 things, I bet they didn't have, and it drove you nuts.
Yeah.
And if they don't have them, now you're trying to put that into them. And I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just really hard.
Really difficult. Okay.
It is.
No, that's very good.
Yep.
That's helpful. You did mention a church that you're coaching that has a pipeline that they're like 13 years old and they hire from within. Are you allowed to say what that church is?
Yeah, Mercy City Church, Nebraska. They're amazing. Matt Erickson's the pastor. I think they do a phenomenal job. Love coaching them. He is a great leader, and they are doing an outstanding job.
Okay, what was the name of the church again?
Mercy City Church, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay.
And so I just gave out Matt's name, so hopefully he's okay with it. Good luck, Matt. They've done it. Now, I will say I've been coaching them for a while, and they've done it somewhat intuitively, but they're at a point where, because they're getting multi-site, they're at a point where it can't be intuitive anymore. It has to be more system. He is a great leader, and he sees leaders and pulls people out and invests in them and figures things out pretty quick. He's a great leader. But in our conversations, he's starting to realize, and I know Matt would be fine sharing this, I can't just be intuitive, which you and I have talked about. I got to be systems, because he's seeing that, man, if I don't create a system, I'm going to create a bottleneck. A lot of it's been intuitive, but now he's moving to systems, and the systems have to happen for them to continue to expand, because as you and I have talked about many times, intuition's never duplicatable. So he's figuring out how do we duplicate it, and that's kind of where we're at with him, is duplicating. And I think 3 sites, and they have no site. They have no they're going to continue to grow, and but he's definitely moving towards systems, because the intuitive can take you so far, and then you got to go to systems. But
sure.
Anyway, yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah. Anything else you got on your mind today?
Those are the big ones.
All right, dude. Awesome. Well, thanks for being on, man, and thanks for hanging out. Always love working with you, and always love the team at Next Level. You guys are amazing.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good day, bud.
Thanks.
All right, bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Rob. He's a great leader, and I love talking about those non-negotiables. So important for you to create in your own ministry. And I want to remind you also to make sure to check out churchboom.org for all things that we have to offer, and we want to help you in any way that we can. To make sure to check out churchboom.org. There's a lot of resources there, and I think you'll love them. We'll see you on the next Fly on the Wall podcast.